In this video, I'm going to show you how to build custom soffit vents for a tiny house, backyard shed, or small backyard workshop. This is my newly built DIY 12 by 16 storage shed that's eventually going to become a workshop. And the big difference between a shed or a tiny house and normal house construction is the soffits are generally quite a bit skinnier than a standard soffit. The soffits on my little tiny house or backyard workshop is only about 3 inches wide, and finding factory-built soffit vents is pretty difficult, and it can be expensive. So I'm going to build some custom soffit vents for this shed. I have installed a ridge vent on this shed, so for that to really be effective, I need some soffit vents in order for the airflow to go from the side of the shed up through and the warm air go out the top of the ridge vent. I did make a video on the ridge vent installation if you'd like to check that out. I'll link that video in the description of this video, along with some other videos that I made when I was building this DIY shed, workshop, or tiny house. Now I'm going to build my custom soffit vents out of materials that I already have, some leftover scraps from actually building the doors, and about the only thing I'm going to end up buying for this is some aluminum screen to keep the bugs and the birds and critters out of the shed. The first thing I did was I used some 1/4 inch plywood that I used for making the doors, and I had some leftover pieces, so I cut it into strips that would fit up underneath the soffit of my tiny house or backyard workshop shed. Mine happened to be about 3 1/4 or 3 inches in width, and I didn't have full lengths to go the full length of the shed. It's a 16-foot shed, so I had to do it in several pieces. And I just cut these out with the skill saw. Next, I marked on each one of my strips exactly where the roof trusses would fall, so I would know exactly where to put the custom soffit vents. And I just centered them in between where the roof trusses would meet with this board. So I have a vent in each void between the trusses. And then I took just a handheld jigsaw along with a 1-inch hole saw, drilled a hole on each side where the ends of the width of the vent would be, and then drew a line between the two holes and took my handheld jigsaw and cut that piece out of the center. My vents came out to be 1 inch in width and 13 inches in length. This should provide plenty of ventilation for the ridge vent in this tiny house, backyard shed, or workshop. Next, I decided to paint the custom soffit vents, and I just used leftover paint I had from painting the shed. And I only painted inside the slots and the bottom side, which will be the part you'll actually be able to see when it's mounted on the side of the tiny house or the shed. Then I bought a roll, the smallest roll I could find, of some aluminum window screen or door screen. It was less than $10. Cut it to the strip width and the length that I needed, and I stapled it on the back side of the custom soffit vents with a generous amount of staples, and this is what's going to actually prevent the birds and the bugs and the bees and so forth from getting up inside the tiny house, shed, or backyard shop. And I just continued to repeat that process for every custom soffit vent until I was done with all of the pieces that I had, and now they're ready to go up onto the shed. I'm going to install them with screws into the ends of the trusses because these aren't very heavy. There's not going to be any load on them, so I think that'll be fine for attaching them to the shed. Here's a look at the completed project and what the custom soffit vents look like once they were installed on the shed, and I think they came out real nice. Remember, you can use these same techniques for your tiny house, small backyard shop, or any small building structure like this one. In my opinion, I think they look really nice. They were cheap to do and pretty easy project. You can do it yourself for very little expense, and they really came out nice. And ultimately, they're going to provide great ventilation for this tiny house, backyard shed, or shop. You can click the video on the screen right now and get some tips, techniques, and ideas for installing a double loft in your tiny home, storage shed, or backyard shop. Don't forget to hit the like button before you leave, and we'll see you over there.